Herkese selamlar dostlar. Bugün Bulgaristan'ın başkenti Sofya'dayım. Şimdi sizlerle Sofia Tour'una katılacağız. Bu ücretsiz bir tur. Her gün saat 11'de oluyormuş sanırım bildiğim kadarıyla. Şimdi metroya binip oraya gideceğiz.
Stories, and hopefully by the end of the tour you'll be experts in Sofia. Now, please, during the tour, feel free to ask questions. You know, that's going to make the tour much more interesting, both for you and for me. I'm a local, was born here, spent my life here, so I'm supposed to know, the city. I also am really attached to the tour because the tour gave me a different perspective for the city. And we locals are, we're very bad people. We tend to see nothing but the negative things in the city, like, broken tiles, endless renovations, chaos, corruption. Yeah, we have these things. But when I started doing the tour, I started seeing the city from, maybe a foreigner's perspective, but it's such a nice and green and relaxed city. And that's the biggest city in the country. There are about 1.5 million people living here, and about 40% of the GDP of the country is being generated here. And okay, now it's weekend, it's summer, so many people are going to the beach. We have this coast to the east of the country, but still, a normal working day is not much busier than that. It's a really relaxed place. You'll see we have plenty of parks, and people prefer hanging out over there instead of working hard and getting stressed out. Of information on their culture. It's simply that archaeologists discovered remains from their houses and so on. But they didn't have an alphabet to write things down, and there was no one to write about them. So in the 1st century AD, when the Roman Empire started expanding here, in the course of some 100 years, it all became an integrated province of the Roman Empire. The Romans, they really loved this particular city here. They called the city Servica, and that was named after the Thracian tribe that was living here, the Serbies. So the belief is that the origins of this name is related to the word Sreda, which means middle. It's really on the middle of the Balkan Peninsula. It dates from 1930. In fact, the first church in that spot was built in the 10th century. That was the first Bulgarian church in that city. But then throughout history, it got several times destroyed and re-established. And I'll tell you about the last destruction of the church. It took place in 1925. And, in 1925, the country was a parliamentary monarchy. So we had a king, and in the parliament there was a communist party, and they really wanted to rule. So, they couldn't win the elections. So instead, they decided to organize a revolution. The revolution in 1923 failed, the Communist Party was banned, and instead, the communists decided to assassinate the king. Great idea. But they realized that would be a difficult task because the king had all these guards. So instead, they went and shot the general. Why not? He was a much easier target, no guard or anything. But then they knew he was going to get a very important funeral with many officials, including the king. And knowing that the funeral would have taken place inside of this church, they managed to bribe the clergy of the church, and he let them stash explosives underneath the dome. When the funeral started, the place was packed with people. Ministers, generals, the elite of the country was there. And that's when the communists detonated all the explosives. The dome flew into the air and collapsed over all these people. That was a complete disaster. More than 200 people found their death on the spot in there. 500 more were badly injured. That's the biggest...
Tur başladı, ben de yakaladım turu son dakikada. İlk başta kiliseyi anlattı. Şu kiliseyi, burada başlıyor tur. Katılmanızı mutlaka tavsiye ederim ama İngilizce, ücretsiz bir tur. En sonunda da eğer isterseniz bağış yapabiliyorsunuz kişiye. Ama tamamen ücretsiz normalde. O size kalmış yani, bağış yapıyor. Şimdi hem Sofya'nın, Bulgaristan'ın tarihinden bahsetti biraz. Hem de kilisenin tarihinden bahsetti. İleride gördüğünüz gibi bir cami var. İşte Osmanlı'dan falan bahsetti. 500 yıl hüküm sürmüşleri, yanlış hatırlamıyorsam. Ondan sonra buradan adım adım gezeceğiz ama içlerine girmeyeceğiz. Çünkü her binanın içine girersek zaten bir bina gezmek zaten yarım saat sürer. O yüzden turu çok uzar. O yüzden sadece bize tarihini anlatacak ve dışarıdan gösterecek. Öyle devam edecektir yani.
Wasn't really tolerated, and the Emperor Hadrian himself told them, stop with that Jesus thing, or I'll kill your daughters. Now they didn't stop, and he killed whole beloved faith. And their mother, Sofia, she passed away a few days later out of grief. And it's a very sad and touching story, but sadly it has nothing to do with the name of our city or the city itself. You know, I'll tell you later at the end of the tour where the name of the city comes from. But in the beginning of, around the year 2000, the place was empty. And to celebrate the millennium, the authorities thought of putting a statue up there. That's really the heart of the city over there. So they found the sculpture and asked him for a concept. And he thought, okay, the city's called Sofia. There's a saint, Saint Sofia. Why don't we just put a statue of Saint Sofia up there? The municipality said, well, that's a cool idea, let's do it. And they placed it up there, and that's when the historians were shocked, because she really has nothing to do with the name of with the city itself. However, locals started accepting her as a symbol of it, because in communist times, on that same spot, used to be the statue of Lenin. Who said it first, though? Many people. The doors remaining within the city, which was slowly making the level grow higher and higher. So already in medieval times, locals realized that when they were digging the ground for the foundations of their buildings, they could actually be using the ruins from Roman times for these foundations. And that's how in the 15th century this church was made. It's based on the remains of an ancient Roman crypt down here. Now, in the 15th century already, the city, the country, it was all conquered by the Ottoman Empire. And there was no Christian state that would fund the establishment of new Christian temples. So on that spot here, there was a market. And in this market, some of the richest and most influential people were the Bulgarian saddle makers. So they decided to collect some money to build their own church here. And it was possible during Ottoman times to build a church. There were some restrictions on how high a church could be. It could not be higher than a mosque, for instance. It couldn't have special ornaments from the outside, but it was still possible to do it. So merchants collected money, decided to do it, asked the authorities for permission, and they told them, yes, you'll receive our permission, and then nothing would happen. And they would ask again and again and again, and permission wouldn't come. There are communities in the country that have waited for 150 years to get a permission to start building their church. And the merchants quickly realized that thing is going to take them forever, so they started troubleshooting with one of the best solutions here in the Balkans, which is corruption. Yeah, so they started bribing the authorities, and soon they had their permission, they were ready to start building, but then another problem appeared. It turns out that they spent all of their money bribing the authorities, and now there was no money for materials for the church. So the legend goes that they started collecting stones and bricks from abandoned buildings. And if you take a closer look at the materials used, you'll notice around the stones some pretty suspicious ancient Roman bricks. So it could have been really the reality that they used these Roman materials, but nevertheless they managed to complete it. And you see the door is very low. That was made on purpose. That's how they were making medieval churches back in days here. They would have that very low entrance to force you to bow before God without even thinking when entering inside of the church. So nowadays, this authentic part, the medieval part of the church, is not often used on that spot. So it started to rain, things started getting filled with water, frogs came from somewhere, settled down here, so it became something like the central swamp of the city, which also had its charm.
Buralar zengin Romalıların yaşadığı yermiş. Şunları sonradan yapmışlar. Burada işte tarihe fazla önem vermemişler. Aslında metro yapılınca burada tarihi şeyler çıkmış. Fakat bu tarihi yerleri koruyamamışlar. Üstüne işte kendileri beton falan yapmış. O yüzden hani tarihe yani arkeolojik kalıntılara uygun davranmamışlar yani. Yani tarihi kalıntıların üstüne bildiğiniz çimentoyla bir şeyler yapmışlar. Hatta bazı taşlar Türkiye'den getirilmiş ama hani yeni eski tarihin üstüne yeni bir şeyler koymuşlar yani.
So, there's a very strong impact from Roman times when it comes to the urban planning of the contemporary city. At the same time, there's a certain influence from Ottoman times when some of the streets were slightly different. And that's because of the big variety of mosques. Now, you can see a mosque here, and traditionally, mosques must be facing the direction of Mecca, which in the case of Sofia the direction is southeast. So that's how many streets in Ottoman times were facing southeast. And when you're walking around, you'll notice how certain streets are crossing in that strange angle. That's the Roman and Ottoman urban planning blending with each other. Other than that, the mosque here is the only functioning one remaining in the city. It dates from the 16th century, and we call it Banya Başı, which means something like the mosque of the Turkish bath. In Ottoman times, right next to it was the Ottoman hammam. So it's kind of a bathing complex. You go and wash yourself, then you go for a prayer in the mosque. Now, as a functioning mosque, there are these calls for prayers. There's a minaret, and you can hear the muezzin performing the call. And normally in the Muslim world, calls are 5 times a day. However, there are a lot of residents living here in the area, and they started complaining about the first call, which is sometimes 5 a.m. So, from the mosque they said, okay, we're skipping the first and the last call, but it's still operating. So if you come at around 3 o'clock here, you'll hear the call for the midday.
Dediğiniz gibi Osmanlı zamanından kalma. Ve İnan'da dediği gibi burada ezan okunuyormuş ama sabah ve yatsı namazları çok erken ve geç olduğu için bazen onları atlıyorlarmış, onları okumuyormuş. Etraftakiler rahatsız olduğu için.
Synagogue in this Sephardic style, and it is in this style because the Jewish community in Bulgaria actually originates from Spain, and they were exiled during the Inquisition. So they decided to settle down here in Ottoman times, because of the policy of the Ottoman Empire. They wouldn't force you to convert to the Islam. It would have been very hard for them to try to melt all these various cultures that were part of the Ottoman Empire. Instead, if you weren't a Muslim, you had to pay some additional taxes, which was a really good deal for the Jewish community. They were kind of, in this way, they were buying their security. And they decided to remain here on these territories for the next hundreds of years. So at the times of the liberation on the territories of Bulgaria, there are about 50,000 of them. Nowadays, though, there are less than 5,000. And it has nothing to do with the fact that the country was allied to the Nazis during the Second World War, because quickly our Jewish community understood what's going on, and they wrote a letter to our king, Boris III. And well, he received the letter and he realized he's in a really delicate situation because everybody was speaking about that thing. And the Jewish community received a really solid support from the entire population, from various priests, from ordinary people, from politicians. At the same time, the king has made certain agreements with the Nazis concerning the future of the Jewish community. And he was trying to figure it out until he remembered how he survived over there by being late. So he decided to use another typical Bulgarian bad habit, which is, can you guess what it was? Well, of course you'll have them next month. They'll be there. And then again and again that thing was repeating. He was coming up with different excuses in time. He was using the Jewish community for infrastructural projects, promising that we're actually building infrastructure for Nazi tanks to cross the country.
Şimdi rehber bazen küçük sorular soruyor. Eğer birisine size küçük bir şeker ikram ediyor. Buna Bulgarca'da soğan deniyormuş ama gerçekten soğan tadı yok, yani sağlıklı bir şekerlemeymiş. Bakalım tadı nasılmış. Tadı neredeyse olips, bizim naneli olips var ya, ona benziyor ama biraz daha hafif. İyi, en azından olips, bizim olipsler biraz daha ağır ama tadı bildiğiniz olips yani. Bu arada turlar her gün sanırım 11'de başlıyor. Mutlaka biraz erken gidip yetişin yani. Ben az daha kaçırıyordum.
Many locals wouldn't have a bathroom in their houses. When the city became a capital, its infrastructure was really bad, so many people wouldn't even think about the bathroom. But then in the beginning of the 20th century, local authorities decided to start promoting hygiene as an important function for the Bulgarians, and they voted to build the public bath, the central public bath here. And immediately it became a huge success because everybody would be going there, especially on a Sunday. And you'd go over there, you'd pay the telak. These are the guys that take care of your hygiene. They would massage you. They were, tough men. They would slap you hard, beating the dirt out of you. Then after that, after you've been, massaged and everything, you'd go to the pools, and then you'd sink in the pools and chit-chat and gossip with everyone. Everybody was there people were feeling really equal because traditionally you'd be completely naked. And actually the building was divided into a male and a female section because otherwise, with people being naked in there, probably it wouldn't be called the public bath, but then public something else. And you know, a remarkable place for many, many years. But then in 1980, the building got closed down and abandoned. So you know, people had their baths now. And it's remained closed for several decades. It was falling apart, and recently they renovated it, and it's reopened its doors as the History Museum of Sofia, which is a very interesting museum, really lovely. I really love it. However, many locals don't because they want their bath back.
Oh, really?
And
Burası da hamamdı. Şöyle göstereyim. Daha sonra işte bildiğiniz gibi müze yapmışlar sanırım. Şu da güzel bir şey. Tam su içmelik.
it's more or less the same mineral water you find in the supermarket, but here it's free. I'm going to show you myself, and I'm not trying to poison you with the water. I'm going to give it a try. So, give it a try if you want. It may feel the slight taste of eggs. It does a bit of a sulfur in there, but it's not so strong. And you know, normally you put in a bottle, it cools down, and there's no taste of eggs anymore, and it's really good for the kidneys and the liver. Yours to try? I'm gonna drink some.
Peki suda içiliyormuş ayrıca. Gelip içebilirsiniz. Biraz hafiften sıcak eleyince. Hamamın suyu buradan geliyormuş. Ama soda gibi değil de normal içme suyuna benziyor tadı yani.
However, there were air raids, and they destroyed most of these things. You know, the country didn't want to participate in the Second World War because of our negative experience with previous wars, and local authorities were pretty sure no matter what we do, we'll be on the losing side. So initially, we decided to be neutral. But in 1941, Nazi troops came to the northern border of the country and told us, "Hi, we're coming, so please pick a side so that we know what we do here in your country." So that's how we decided to be on their side, because it was safer for the country. But then being allied with Nazis meant that we should declare war to their enemies. That was this tricky moment. So, you know, authorities started looking at the map, and they saw Soviet Union, well, too close to us, really big. We're not declaring a war to them. However, they thought, oh, look at how far away the UK and the USA are. Let's declare a symbolic war to them, they said. So we declared that special symbolic war, then didn't really get the idea of the symbolic war and started dropping these non-symbolic bombs over the city, and that's what destroyed 1/3 of the city, mainly here at the city center. So after the communists got the power, they decided to wipe down everything that was left here and began the construction of what became the Lenin Square in this neoclassical Stalinist style, the favorite style of the communists. First, they completed that building in 1955, and that was the headquarters of the Communist Party. Can you guess what was up there on the place of the flag during communist times? A red star. Yes. Your second candidate. Ruby, because there's a similar ruby star in Moscow. But with the fall of the communism in 1990, the star was taken down, and people rushed to get a piece of it to sell that ruby. It turned out to be red glass. Who would have thought? Yeah. So nowadays it says Narodno Sobranie, which means National Assembly. It's not really the National Assembly. It's rather the place where the deputies are gathering in commissions and they're fine-tuning the laws. We'll see the Parliament building at the end of the tour. Next, they completed that building. Streets connecting the four main gates of the fortress. So there is the eastern gate, and Romans back in days had these massive wooden gates that would get closed every evening at around sunset. And you know, the fortress would remain closed throughout the night. So you know, if your home was in the fortress and you were late to go back home, they would never open the doors for you. You know, Romans were very strict, didn't like people being late, so it would remain closed. On the place of that street was also passing a very important trading road. That was the Via Diagonalis road connecting Constantinople and nowadays Belgrade.
So that was bringing this constant flow of traders and travelers passing through the city. And that's something that made the city one of the biggest and richest cities on the Balkan Peninsula back in the days, because that's how the city became a big trading hub. And you know, people that were coming here had a lot of things to do. You can go to the baths, you can do trading, you can go to the amphitheater. And actually the city used to have the third largest amphitheater in the Roman Empire. About 20 years ago they discovered it. Well, they were digging for a hotel, so they built the hotel on top of parts of these remains. So till recently you could have, you know, freely entered the lobby and see these things, but COVID made this hotel close down. So it's kind of bankrupt now. But back in the days, these guys used to keep the king safe, and that was something really prestigious that you could have done. Nowadays, though, they're more like symbolically here, representing the sovereignty of the country. There are two of them here, two more in there. So, you know, the ones in there are, protecting the most important flag of the country. They're not part of the military. And it's not like the Buckingham Palace. I mean, if you go too close to them, they're not supposed to do anything. However, see these gentlemen over there? They're the actual guards of the guards. And they'll start shouting at you, blow a whistle, you know, tell you words in Bulgarian, that's scary. So yeah, try it if you're into mood of adventures. Other than that, that's the presidency. The president doesn't look here. According to our constitution, the president doesn't have executive power. It's more like a symbolic figure. But then, in the past 2 years, we had 5 elections, and none of them was able to produce a stable government. So in the meantime, the president was forming temporary governments. So he was basically getting the executive power in this period. So about like 3-4 weeks ago, a new government was formed, and it feels pretty unstable for the moment, but we'll see how it works out. That's normally how the country is supposed to work, with a parliament and a prime minister and lawmaking taking place, something that was really blocked for the past 2 years. This main building with a hot spring. And they think that they were using the main building to control the temperature of the water, either heating it up or cooling it down, then sending the water to the rest of the buildings where the spa procedures were taking place. However, only later, the building was turned into a church. You know, there's the Emperor Constantine the Great, and he made this Edict of Milan, which made all the religions in the Roman Empire equal. And that's when this building was converted into a church. Then the rest of the buildings became his private apartments. This emperor, he really loved the city. He was born in the city of Niš, that's in Serbia, and it's not so far away from here. And back in the days in the region, that was the main city, Serbia. So he really loved it, and he even thought of turning that city into the next capital of the Roman Empire. But eventually he was convinced that the city doesn't have access to water like a river or a sea, so it wasn't so good strategically. So eventually he chose Byzantium and created Constantinople over there. But still, he would be spending a lot of time in that city, and he needed a place for his guests. So he converted the rest of these buildings where spa procedures were taking place before, they were converted into his private VIP apartments. And some of them had that floor heating system, which is visible, especially in the room over there. You see there are these tiles. Now, on top of these tiles, there were short columns, and on top of them, there was another layer, another floor. So there are like these arches. These were the canals that were providing hot water, natural hot water, that'd be flowing underneath the ground and naturally heating the floor during the winter, which could be very useful because, you know, back in the days, like say 10, 15 years ago, traditional winters would have at least a week with -20 here in the city. Actually, the city is a little bit elevated. We're at 5 popular park here in the city. Many people would come here to meet with friends, and you know that's what people are doing in the summer. Instead of going to a cafe, you'd go to you'd go out to the park, sit down with friends, chat, and in the evening, youngsters would crawl out and they'd start drinking beer in public. And actually, that's illegal, but nobody cares. I mean, there's the Ministry of Defense with the constant police presence, and there's never been an occasion when police makes a problem out of that. We even have these so-called bench parties. put few benches together, and then you party all night long until 5, 6 a.m. And you know, if you come here like in 7 a.m., the place is really dirty because it's been a big party, but then quickly they clean it, and now it feels like a normal, nice, civilized park. It's lovely. Now, most of the locals, everyone really, call that place the Garden of the National Theatre, because of the National Theatre. Now, the building was established in the beginning of the 20th century, and about 20 years ago, they were renovating it, and you know, they were repainting the facade and everything, and they repainted these golden ornaments. So one of the workers decided to make a little joke and painted something additional. So can you find that thing? It's related to the little baby angel of the... He was a very successful writer, and he was writing mostly patriotic stuff. And he was still alive when the theater was completed and was named after him. His house was some 100 meters away from here, and just imagine his evening routine. He'd go out of his house, he'd start walking that street over there called Ivan Vazov. Then he'd make a right turn, enter the theater called Ivan Vazov, and then he'd watch a play written by Ivan Vazov. There's the urban legend that goes, well, you know.
Adam gerçekten çok iyi anlatıyor. Zaten film direktörüymüş, film yönetmeni değil. Art direktörüymüş. Bazen de bu şeyleri yapıyormuş işte. 3-4 günde böyle turlar yapıyormuş. Yani mutlaka ondan dinlemenizi tavsiye ederim. Hem şakalar yapıyor hem de güzelce anlatıyor yani tarihi.
That's a very old Bulgarian tradition. Some believe it was brought by these ancient Bulgarians from Asia. So it goes like that. On every 1st of March here, people started changing these things. We call them matnica. And then normally they're in the form of a bracelet, so you put them on the wrists of your friends and family. And you're supposed to wear them for a month or two until it's spring. And then in spring, you know, storks start coming back because they are migrating to the south for the winter. And when storks come back, and when you see a stork, you're supposed to take your martinica off and then put it on a blossoming branch of a tree. So, you know, that will bring you luck and health until the rest of the year. So, still, people do it a lot. This tree has plenty of them. Oh yeah, you can see them, and they're from various years. Because simply it's the first one that starts blooming in spring. It has these beautiful white colors. It's like that because that's a plum. And you know, plums are some really respected fruits here in Bulgaria, because out of plum we make rakia, yeah, the favorite drink of every real Bulgarian man. So you'll get a candy for that answer. So the rakia is traditionally real men here who know the secret of distilling their own rakia. So many people do it at their homes, and if you go to a supermarket or like a restaurant, you'll find rakia which is limited to 40%. But then the real thing is stronger. Once I tried homemade rakia, which was 72% alcohol. And I guess that's like the solution for the cold days of the winter. You lock yourself at home with your buddies and you start drinking your small sips of rakia combined with salad, and slowly start feeling this warmth from within. All the problems start fading away. You start floating around. And you know, a recent discovery was made that the rakia is a natural remedy for the coronavirus. It's a local discovery. But that. Back in the days, in Roman times, these were the outskirts of the city. So the Romans decided to build the church here on that spot because, well, it would be really visible from a very long distance. And whenever travelers were approaching the city from a very long distance, they would first see the church. And they'll say, oh, look, there is Sofia. The city was called Serdica, but that became the most interesting site of the city. And that's how gradually, eventually, it gave its name to it. Everybody was referring to us Sofia, Sofia, Sofia. So for the first time, around the 12th century, you know, it was we have some information that a Bulgarian king wrote down the name of the city as Sofia instead of Serdica or Sredets, which was one of its other names. Ottomans converted the building into a mosque, and then after the liberation, because of its place being on this hill, it was the firemen that took it over, and they built a tower on top. And actually, if you go in there, and it's very, very curious to see the building. This is the authentic one from the 6th century. You can go there, right to the left. There are images of how the building looked like at the times of the liberation. Also, a photo of the building as it was the fire department. But then in the year of 1930, it got turned back into a church, because basically the other buildings in the area were blocking firemen's view, so there was no sense into keeping that building. So it's very interesting. Also, they discovered here underneath the ground that was the cemetery of the city back in the days in Roman times. They were simply digging the ground to strengthen the foundations of the church, and they discovered all of these tombs. So they created an underground museum accessible from in there. So if you're into these things, definitely check it out. It means lion. Our national hero is called Vasilevsky, Vasil the Lion. On brands of beers, normally they have on their logo a lion. We have 3 lions on the coat of arms of the country. We even believe that the shape of our country on the map resembles a lion, which I know requires some Bulgarian imagination, so you can see that thing, but trust me, it's there. So in the beginning of the 20th century, the authorities decided to make this monument of the unknown soldier, and a sculptor decided to make a lion because he was convinced that everybody's going to like it, and he made that lion. However, locals were shocked and they completely rejected it because, you see, the lion looks a little skinny, and that's not how Bulgarian lions are supposed to be. Bulgarian lions are supposed to be tough and muscular and fat. So locals were very angry and they exiled the lion all alone. It spent decades on a random road leading to London. And many years later, when they made this new memorial of the unknown soldier with an eternal flame, in a poem written by Ivan Vazo, the lion returned here. On the other side, this building, we call it the Holy Synod. It's something like the Parliament of the Orthodox Church. That is where the patriarch is gathering with the rest of the important priests, and they're fixing the problems of the church. Further down is, behind the orange buses, is the National Assembly, the Parliament building, where our 240 deputies are voting the wise laws of our country. Further down is the green roof of the Sofia University, the most important university in the country. And finally, here is the Alexander Nevsky Cathedral. Alexander Nevsky is not a really well-known figure here. Barely anyone knows him in Sofia, except for me. He was a Russian prince who defended Russia from the Teutonic Order. It was pretty threatening that they'll take over Moscow, but then there was this prince, and he stopped them. And you see, nothing to do with our history. However, he was the patron saint of Alexander II, the guy who fought against the Ottoman Empire and liberated Bulgaria. So in order to express our gratitude for that thing, we decided to name our biggest cathedral after his patron saint. And once it was decided that this city is becoming the capital, locals decided to build the biggest cathedral on the Balkan Peninsula, which was a very challenging thing because we simply didn't have the funds for such a big thing. But then locals were very stubborn, and it was decided that we're building that thing and we'll figure it out on the way. So locals started collecting donations, and they've been collecting donations for 40 years. And back in the days, people didn't really have a lot of money, so instead they'd be donating their donkeys, their roosters and cows for the construction of that thing. After they eventually collected enough animals, they...
Bir tur bitti. Biz şimdi bir arkadaşla geziyoruz. Şöyle bir heykeğe geldik. Şuna Lenin'e benzettim ama Lenin mi değil mi? Siz yorumlara yazın. Ben de bilmiyorum. Sonra gidip araştıracağım bunu. Şimdi ayrıca bir komünist turu varmış. Yani komünist tur dediğim yanlış anlamayın. Komünizm döneminde yapılan eserleri falan anlatan bir tur da var. Ona da arkadaşım katılmış. Onun mutlaka katılmanızı tavsiye ediyor. O da 14 euro civarındaymış. Yani tabii rehber açıklaması daha güzel oluyor. Vaktiniz varsa mutlaka ona da katılın. Şu kilisenin üstte sanırım altın dediler ama bilmiyorum doğru mu yalan mı. Gerçekten kültürlerin karşımı bir yer, hani İstanbul gibi. Roma döneminden kalma, Bizans döneminden kalma, hem Osmanlı döneminden kalma, işte Rusların komünizm döneminde kalan eserler falan var. Yani şehir bir de katman katman abi. O yüzden çok tarihi bir yer yani. Mutlaka gelmenizi, gezmenizi tavsiye ederim. Turda dinleyin kesinlikle. Tur olmazsa olmaz baba. Bu arada şu kiliseye girerken abi resim çekmeyin. Adam 10 leva istiyor. O yüzden dikkatli olun. Ya da çaktırmadan çekmeye çalışın. O yüzden içeride video ve fotoğraf çekmedim. Burayı kilisenin böyle içeride yapılmasının nedeni hani kiliseyi gizlemek istemişler. O yüzden de kiliseyi tam ortaya koymuşlar. Böylece dışarıdan görülmüyor. Tabii işte her gelen buraya değiştirmiş. Mesela Osmanlı gelince cami yapılmış bildiğim kadarıyla. Komünistler gelince ama garaj yapmışlar burayı. Burası zaten Roma döneminden kalma bildiğiniz gibi. Bayağı bir eski yani. Isıtma sistemi de normal sıcak sudan yapılıyormuş yani. Doğal kaynak suyundan. Gördüğünüz gibi buradaki en büyük camilerden birisi burası. Zaten Bulgaristan'da Osmanlı zamanında kalan bayağı Türk var. Arada burada yaşamlarını devam ettiriyorlar. Zamanında tabii ki onlar da zorluklar yaşamışlar Bulgaristan'da. Hatta bir kısmı Türkiye'de göç etmiş. Ama bir kısmı da burada kalmış. Artık durumlar seninle göre daha iyiymiş yani. Şartlar daha iyi eskisine göre. Şimdi abi Bulgaristan'ı izleyecektik ama arkadaşım Asya yemeği yiyelim dedi. Tamam ben de yiyelim dedim. Benim yemeğim bulgurlu pilav, esmer pilav, karidesli, teriyaki soslu. Yours is with vegetable, right?
Also has shrimps.
Yeah. O da sebzeli bir beyaz baz aldı. Üstüne de balık ekliyorsun mesela, istediğini ekleyebiliyorsun. Fiyatlar normal yani 15 leva civarı. Yani ikiye bölsen 7,5 euro falan yapıyor. Ama tadı lezzetli yani sevdim. Burası Walk to Walk. Hediyelik eşya almak isterseniz de hemen ilerisinde de hediyelik eşyaları var. Şöyle göstereyim sizlere. Şurada güllü şeyler var, kremler falan var. 3,5 lira var. Şöyle farklı hediyelikler de var. Almak isterseniz. Şunlar güzele benziyor. Ben yanında bir şey taşıyamayacağım tabii ki. Şunlar da 2,5 lira falan. Fiyatlar fena değil yani, uygun. Şurada magnetler var, 4 lira. Bunlarda kupalar falan var. Bu 43. Şu 60 lira mesela. Böyle yani, bizim bakır kaplar da var. Şundan bir benzeri bizde var, hatta evde var. Lavayı özlerseniz burada şey de var. Burada yiyebilirsiniz. Parkın içine geldim şimdi. Bir park var. İsmini bilmiyorum. Burada küçük bir kilise yapmışlar. Hemen size göstereyim. Bu kiliseyi de komünizm zamanında ölen insanlar için yapılmış. Arkadaşımın dediğine göre. Hemen burada yine bir haç var. Bir de şurada gördüğünüz gibi sanırım ölen insanların isimleri yazılmış galiba. Gördüğünüz gibi bayağı duvarlar dolmuş. Hemen bu tarafta da burada da bayağı isimler var. Bir de ayrıca burada Berlin duvarının bir parçası olması lazım. Ama onu bulamadık. Bizim arkadaşım görmüş de bugün bana gösteremedi. Siz gelirseniz onu da biraz ararsanız bulursunuz sanırım. Ben bakıyorum ama bulamadım bir türlü. Burada ayrıca hediyelik eşyalar da var. Parkta satıyorlar. Yemekler vesaire de var. Eğer lokal bir şeyler denemek isterseniz buraya da gelebilirsiniz. Değişik değişik ürünler var, hediyelik eşyalar var. Şunlar bal ürünleri galiba. Şunlar güzelmiş mesela. Bakalım, başka şapkalar var. Gerisi bildiğiniz gibi. Bunlar da barbekü, bayağı lezzetli gözüküyor. Şunlar bayağı lezzetli duruyor. Tam bizim mangal gibi. Bayağı tam güzel kokuyor yani. Sizin canınızı çektirmeyeyim buradan şimdi ama gelip denerseniz seversiniz. Arkadaşım yemiştim burada, bana tavsiye etti. Binaları falan görüyorsunuz. Burada metro. Metro yok, tramvay. Yani bazı yerler eski gibi ama bazı binalar çok da iyi durumda değil. Ama yani bir Avrupa Birliği ülkesi, hani sokakları hani geniş bir Avrupa ülkesi tadı veriyor böyle. Hani ağaç yeşilliğe dikkat etmişler, parkları yapmışlar. Yani çevre düzenlemesi iyi yani o bakımdan. Yani bir sıkıntı da görmedim yani, sokaklar falan. Rahat rahat gezebiliyorsunuz. Eğer videoyu beğendiyseniz kanala abone olup videoyu beğenmeyi unutmayın dostlar. Eğer paylaşırsanız da çok sevinirim. 1000 aboneye ulaşmaya çalışıyorum. Her türlü desteğinize teşekkür ederim şimdiden. Yolda karşılaştığım beni alan Salava'ya, Ahmet kardeşim çok sağ olsun, beni Sofya'ya kadar getirdi vallahi. Çok iyi oldu. Olmasaydı belki hala yollarda olacaktım. Ondan sonra diğer arkadaşlar da hepsine ismimi söyleyemedim. Tüm arkadaşlar çok teşekkür ederim. Bir dahaki bölümde görüşmek üzere. Kendinize iyi bakın.